The first thing I noticed wasn't the woman standing next to him. It was the zipper. My husband never zipped his jacket all the way up to his neck. He once said it made him look like he was trying to be someone else. But through the frosted glass of the meeting room I could see that clean straight line so unfamiliar it made everything behind it feel suspicious. I stood in the hallway, his phone in my hand, waiting for 40 minutes without going in. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I wanted to be sure I was seeing exactly what I needed to see. When the door opened, the woman adjusted her clothes. A very small gesture. Small enough for others to ignore, but not small enough for me to. The phone buzzed. A reminder: Meridian Awards Gala 7:00 p.m. Tonight he would be honored. And tonight I had planned to tell him who I really am. I placed the phone on the reception desk, smiled, then stepped out into the cold February air without looking back. If you've ever ignored a tiny sign, only to realize later it changed everything, stay with me because this story begins with a detail no one else noticed. I didn't cry in the car, not because it wasn't big enough to break me, but because I've never been the kind of person who reacts the moment things fall apart. My husband used to think that was distance. He said I was hard to read, hard to reach. But he was wrong. It wasn't distance. It was timing. I drove in silence, noticing how steady my hands were on the wheel, how even my breathing stayed, how clear my mind felt, almost cold. Some people explode. Some people panic. And then there are people who remember every detail and place them exactly where they belong when the time comes. I'm the third kind. My grandfather once said patience isn't about waiting. It's about knowing exactly what you're waiting for. And I had been waiting for a long time, longer than anyone would imagine in what looked like a peaceful marriage. Red light. I stopped. Stared straight ahead. Have you ever realized you understood everything long ago? You just hadn't chosen the moment to admit it yet. If you have, then you'll understand why I didn't turn back that day. The light turned green. I didn't rush. Some things in life don't need urgency, especially when you're the only one in the game who knows all the rules. My husband thought he understood me. A woman who worked from home, a freelance designer, a life neat and modest just enough. Someone who didn't ask for much, didn't demand much. Someone predictable. He didn't know I own 38 commercial properties. He didn't know about the quarterly meetings I attend under the name Hartwell Development. He didn't know the building where his company leases 6 floors isn't just an expense. It's a decision I signed. I never lied. I just never told the whole story. I used to think that if I stripped all of that away, if I kept only the simplest version of myself, then love would stay for the right reasons. I wanted to know if there was nothing to prove, what would remain of me. Now I have my answer. Have you ever hidden the strongest part of yourself just to see who would stay? If you have, then you understand why some truths don't need to be told early. They just need to be told at the right moment. And the most ironic part, he wasn't just standing in my world. He was standing on top of it. I remember clearly the time he talked about needing capital to make partner. He spoke as if it were his only chance, a door that would open just once. I nodded, listened, and a few weeks later funding appeared. A small business support program. Flawless paperwork. Reasonable terms. He called it luck. I called it structure. The Meridian project, the one putting him on stage tonight, was built on land leased by a Hartwell subsidiary. The price approved by me. The numbers he proudly presented to the board, I had read them before they even existed. I wasn't behind him. I was beneath the foundation. And he never once thought to look down. Have you ever helped someone rise higher only to realize they never even asked where you were standing? If you have, stay with me, because some truths once revealed, don't let anything go back to the way it was. That night everything unfolded exactly the way he planned. The lights, the clink of glasses, the congratulations repeated enough times to dissolve into the atmosphere. He moved between groups with that familiar confidence, retelling the story of the Meridian project as if it began and ended with him. I sat there listening, like I always had, but with one difference. This time I wasn't listening to understand him. I was listening to confirm that I had understood enough. When his name was called, the room filled with applause. He stepped onto the stage, smiled, delivered the lines he had prepared. And when he looked down at me, thanking me in front of everyone, I smiled back. A perfectly timed smile. I knew exactly when I would stand up. Not sooner. Not later. Right at the moment when everything had been placed where it could no longer be undone. Have you ever sat in a crowded room and known that a single sentence from you could change how everyone sees everything? If you have, then you understand why I chose that night to tell the truth. I stood up just as the room settled into silence. No one expected that from me. That's exactly why I chose it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Just a polite opening line enough to turn every head back in my direction. I introduced myself. Not the name they were used to hearing. The name they had never placed correctly. Claire Hartwell. There was no immediate whispering. Just a thin, delicate pause, like a drawing flipped to the other side, and suddenly everyone realizes they've been reading it wrong the entire time. I spoke about what had always been there. The land. The funding. The structure. Nothing more, nothing less. No explanations. Just placing the truth exactly where it belonged. I didn't look at my husband for long. There was no need. I knew he was beginning to understand piece by piece, slowly, like someone realizing they've been standing on the wrong foundation for years. I sat down before anyone could ask a question. Do you know what makes a room fall completely silent? Not volume, but a truth too precise to argue with. I left before the night was over. No arguments. No hurried explanations in the hallway. I hadn't prepared for a conversation. I had prepared for an ending. The West Side apartment had been ready for a long time. Minimalist interior, just enough light, everything in its place, as if it had been waiting for this exact day. I set my bag down, put water on to boil, and sat there listening to my phone vibrate. 4 calls. I listened to them one by one. The first was confusion. The second carried tension. The third was shorter, saying he could explain. And by the fourth there was only one thing left. Silence between the words. I had my answer before he ever called. The paperwork was already in place. The prenuptial agreement he signed years ago still held its weight. Everything tied to Hartwell remained exactly where it belonged. No disputes. No gray areas. Just clarity. Have you ever realized that a real ending isn't when everything falls apart, but when you have nothing left to ask? If you have, then you understand why I never called back. The next morning I started working as usual. Not the old work. The one I had been preparing for a long time, just waiting for the right moment to set it in motion. I reached out to 4 young architects at his firm. People I had noticed long before. Not because they stood out, but because they worked without needing to be seen. They were the ones behind the details others received awards for. I invited them to a private meeting. Brief. Direct. No detours. I laid out the plan. A new studio. Focused on affordable housing and community projects. And more importantly, real ownership. Not promises. Not symbolic titles. Ownership. 3 of them agreed immediately. The 4th called back the next morning. No one asked me why I was doing this. Maybe they already knew. Have you ever seen the people who truly create value, but never get their names on it? If you have, then you understand why sometimes the fairest thing you can do isn't to change the people. It's to change the structure. Everything that followed didn't happen loudly. There was no official announcement. No article explaining anything. And yet the story spread like stories always do in a community small enough that everyone knows each other and large enough that no one can control what gets retold. His name was still on the award. The building still stood there, as beautiful as it was always meant to be. But the way people spoke about it began to shift. Not all at once. Little by little. Clients started asking different questions. Partners began looking more closely. And the names that once lived behind the drawings slowly found their way to the front. I didn't need to do anything else. Some things, once the truth is placed exactly where it belongs, will move the rest on their own. Have you ever witnessed something that didn't change in form, but changed completely in meaning? If you have, then you understand why some endings don't need action. They just need to be seen clearly. In the end, everything returned to a kind of quiet. Not the quiet after a storm. The kind that comes after everything has been put back in place, when, for the first time in a long while, everything stands exactly where it belongs. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel lost the way people usually describe it. I just felt lighter. As if I had been carrying something for so long I'd forgotten it had weight. My grandfather used to say, what you build matters less than how you choose to build it. Every decision, every silence, every time you speak, it's a brick. And one day you'll have to live inside whatever you've constructed. I chose silence for many years. And I chose to speak once at the right moment. Not to change anyone else, but so I wouldn't have to keep explaining things to myself. If you're in a place where you have to shrink yourself to hold on to something, it might be time to ask whether it ever truly belonged to you. And if this story made you pause a little longer, think a little deeper, then maybe you're standing in front of a decision of your own. Some choices don't need noise. Just enough clarity that you no longer feel the need to turn back.